Okay, we are here. This is episode 4 of That Moment Heart to Heart Talk with Victoria. And I am so excited to be here with Michelle Dickinson, my very fast friend and someone that I just feel I have so much synergy with. And before we get started introducing her, That Moment Heart to Heart Talk with Victoria is a show that is all about growth through struggle. I am highlighting amazing people doing incredible things in the world, contributing to others, and their own story of whatever it is that brought them to a point of struggle and how they have found triumph through it. So today we are here with Michelle. Michelle, you are incredible. You are an advocate. You have an incredible story. You are a TEDx speaker. You have a book, and you just do amazing work in the world of resilience. And so I'm going to leave it to you. Can you share a little bit more about what you do?
Sure, Victoria, thank you for having me. I adore you, and I'm so grateful that we were introduced through a mutual friend. I definitely feel like we are soul sisters on many levels. So, oh my gosh, how do you just basically shared sort of how I got here. I, had a really great career in the pharmaceutical industry for 19 years and had no idea that I would ever become a very passionate mental health advocate. If you asked me that 5 years ago, I would have laughed at you. I would have been like, that's not going to happen. I'm just going to stay in the pharma world for eternity. But life shows up and life happens for you. I was introduced to really powerful work through Landmark by a mentor of mine, and that began a very powerful healing journey for me. I did that program, and because I grew up in such a challenging childhood with my mom, who is bipolar, I had a lot of anger and I was really incomplete about her. So that work helped me, and that work ultimately led me to start my own company. So what I'm doing right now is I have a mental health company called Trifecta Mental Health, and I'm out to help there be more compassionate cultures in the workplace, in the school system for people with invisible disabilities, because it's more prevalent than we talk about. And they all have a place at the table, and they all have a contribution to make. And it's there's work to be done there. So that's really what I'm up to in the world.
I am just blown away. It's incredible. And can you share a little bit with people that are watching, what are invisible disabilities? What do you mean by that? And, tell us a little bit more.
So there's physical disabilities. We're familiar with that, right? Organizations have, implemented, ramps for people with physical disabilities. But what are organizations doing for those with invisible disabilities? And those are really the mental illnesses that people struggle with, that oftentimes they try to put on the shelf at home and go to work and pretend that that they don't have it, because there's a lot of shame and embarrassment. So invisible disabilities really are those mental illnesses that many of us keep a secret, that we're ashamed about, and that we don't feel is appropriate to bring to work.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So people are experiencing them, not always sharing about them. This is something that you and I have talked about, that this happens across the board with, with the workplace and even at schools with kiddos. Incredible. And your TEDx talk, did it have something to do with, I know the answer to that because I watched it, but does it have something to do with your story?
It so does. It's funny because, growing up with a mother who had bipolar disorder, it was nothing that I really was talking about when I was experiencing it. And then as I became an adult, I tried to believe that I wasn't affected by it. Like, it didn't really shape me, but it really did. And Landmark's work helped me get really complete about the anger, and being at the effects of my mother had really put me back into the cockpit of my life, in that I could create a future and not be a victim of her abuse, because she was very abusive. I mean, it's punishing to love someone with a mental illness. So I never really spoke about that experience until, I happened to be talking to a couple of colleagues, and one of them nominated me, and she was like, "You have to tell your story." I'm like, well, that's a really personal story to be telling in the workplace, because our company had a TEDx platform. And so I found myself standing in front of the audience and telling that story, like sort of bearing my soul. But miracles happen when you are the first person. When you have the courage to go first and tell your story, people just start reaching out to you, and they can identify with little shreds of themselves in your story, or they may have been suffering, or they may love someone with a mental illness. So that really woke me up to the power of telling my story, and I shouldn't keep it within me. I should tell it. So, yeah.
Oh, incredible. And what a trailblazer you are. And in doing that, it was healing, and it was also probably healing from many, many, many other people. Not probably, definitely. What was, I'm sure many people can relate to this as well, but what was it like growing up with a parent who experienced bipolar disorder?
Yeah, my mom had the typical cycling of bipolar disorder. She would have extreme mania, where she was extremely either happy or excited, incredibly productive, and then she would crash and have those deep, depressing lows where she wouldn't do anything. She would cry unconsolably. There was nothing I could do to sort of help her when she was really sad. And ultimately, I lived through several cycles of that, and ultimately she would be hospitalized, undergo shock therapy, be out of the house for several weeks. My grandmother would step in and try to, help run the house. But it was hard. It was punishing. I mean, I always wanted those. My mom would have these little glimmers of when she was truly her authentic self right after being hospitalized. And I wanted to hold on to those so desperately, because those were like the small moments of normalcy. Otherwise it was extreme mania and depression, and it was hard to hold on, and really, you don't really have your mother in that case,
And yeah, I work with so many, childhood is such a formative time, right? I always say that when we adults have, a partner, or not even, there are some adults that also have a hard time, but we're a little bit more resourced than we are when we're kiddos. When we're kiddos, really need that parent, and it's a time in our life that really forms how we see the world, how we see relationships, how we see ourselves. So that true. Really is poignant.
But you know what though, Victoria, I will add that, like, you don't know any better. So people say to me, how'd you do it? I said, I didn't know any better. And you know what? I got creative and found ways to get that nurturing mother love, like from my aunt or my grandmother or my girlfriend's mother. I would find ways to get nurtured. So it wasn't I was very resourceful.
Of course. And you can just see that inside, like just who you are. Very, very, you're very soft in the heart center, and very, very resilient and strong at the same time. And it's beautiful. And so when I think about your story, and I actually remember reading an excerpt from your book that I think you have on your website about just that, coming home. Yep, there it is. What a beautiful book. Can you just hold it up for people?
Yeah. Thank you.
And read the title, Breaking Into My Life.
Yeah, Breaking Into My Life, Growing Up with a Bipolar Parent and My Battle to Reclaim Myself.
I recommend this book to everybody. I ordered my copy. It's on and one of the excerpts that just really grabbed me was when you were coming home. Yeah. You were coming home, and one day, there would be one kind of reaction, and then the next day there would be another kind of reaction. That inconsistency and just not knowing what to expect, it just pulled at my heart.
Yeah, really, that was actually the impetus of, that was the opening of my TED Talk. You can find my TED Talk on my YouTube channel, along with my series. But that was the opening of my TED Talk, trying to get people to really understand what it's like to live with someone who's so volatile, and how you learn to sort of play to their moods, and you learn to do what you have to do to navigate that so that you're not at the effects of it as badly. So yeah, like my mom, her moods would be like one moment she loved me and she was affectionate and loving and caring and nurturing. And the next moment, I mean, I could look at her in a strange way and I forget about it. I was, definitely, getting hit or being, verbally abused, whatever. It was so uncertain. And, I was always walking on eggshells. It was really hard to love someone with a mental illness. And I say that to people today, like, if you love someone with a mental illness, you have got to take care of yourself. And as a little girl, I didn't know better, but as an adult, I know better. And if I could help a caregiver by reminding them to put the oxygen mask on themselves first and not deplete themselves because they love their loved one so much, I try really hard to remind people of that.
I love that. And is there something that you want people to know about those that experience invisible disabilities, namely bipolar disorder, for example? Because we can sometimes talk so much about the impact of that, right? And there's a huge impact. And at the same time, a lot of your work is advocating for understanding and demystifying a lot of the things that we think about people who experience it. And is there a message that you have for people out there?
Yeah, I think, for many years, I was mad at my mom. I was angry. It's hard to see what life is like through her eyes or through someone with a mental illness's eyes if you are so focused on what life is like being at the effects of their abuse. So I was always at the effects of her abuse. So therefore I was angry and I was very resentful, but I never once paused to try to think about how the roller coaster is, what it is like for her. Right? Like, what is life like for her where she can't stop crying? So, again, I have to keep referring to the Landmark Forum because when I did the Landmark Forum, I got really present to, oh my goodness, like I really should maybe put myself in her shoes. It does not excuse the abuse whatsoever. I just want to be clear about that because people will get mad and say, well, she abused you. Well, you know what? I couldn't see clearly because I was so focused on being at the effect of that abuse. But right after my mother passed away, I wanted to get really curious. And so my message really is all about curiosity. Be curious, because I started to get curious about what was life like for her. Because when you have curiosity, it can lead to you having a little bit more compassion and understanding. Ignorance is the biggest enemy of mental health and the stigma is the ignorance. So I watched this documentary by Stephen Fry called The Secret Life of the Manic Depressant. And it had Carrie Fisher in it, and Carrie Fisher suffered from bipolar. So through that documentary, I got really aware of what life could have been like for her. And then I had more compassion. I could have more compassion and go, wow, like they just hold on for the ride. Like, they get medicated and then the medication doesn't work, or they go into shock therapy. And like, I don't even want to try to explain what that's like. It's just so that they can normalize. So there's just so much that you could do to educate yourself so that you can have more compassion and find more love in your heart for these people that struggle.
I love your message. I'm present to my puppy. Hold on one second. Listen, you gotta do what you gotta do. And I'm not gonna chase you, Vanna. Stop barking. She agrees with you. My apologies for everyone out there. I love that. And I always think about what would happen if all of us were just benevolently curious about the other. And I would imagine that would be very difficult as a child, to stop and wonder. And then you said when your mom died. Now, how old were you when your mom died?
I was in my 30s when she passed away. Yeah.
And did your healing begin then?
My healing actually started right before she passed away with a really lovely lunch we had for her birthday. But I still hadn't gone through the self-discovery work. So I think my other message is get curious about your own life and how you look at life, what your lens is, because I would never have had the courage to step on the TED stage, to have written my memoir, to be an advocate if I didn't do the work. We all have work to do, no matter what kind of childhood. If you had the Beaver Cleaver childhood, you still have work to do. So like I had to do the work, right? And unpack all of this. So yeah, I mean, I would say that that's the most important thing is you have to have the courage to look within yourself and see how, that'll help you be able to understand why you react the way you do.
Now, I would love to dig into that a little bit if it's okay with you,
Absolutely.
because I know, even for someone so evolved, right? But I know that when I do my own self work, and I am like, anger is something actually that I also feel a lot. I just took a personality test, and one of my main emotions was anger, and I was not surprised, even though people would never think it. But anger, right? And this feeling of when something is unjust, something is done and it shouldn't have been done, or it shouldn't have happened that way. How would you describe your journey of self-discovery and that self-work? Because it's like we want to just point the finger and say, but that happened to me. That actually happened.
Yeah.
And I have every reason to feel the way that I feel. And then what you're saying, which is true, is, look over here.
Yeah.
First.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I would never, I mean, people gave me all the permission in the world to hate my mother and to hate my childhood and be mad at the world. Like I had people, to this day, I still have people that go, it's okay to be mad at your parents, but it doesn't serve you. It's like the drinking of the poison and hoping someone else gets sick. Like it doesn't serve you. So you have to look within. You have to understand why you are the way you are. I think, for me, I still deal with it. I'll be honest with you. I'm 48 years old. I still deal with the repercussions of that experience, and I still have work to do. I think we're all in evolution, right? So I think the biggest thing for me is the fear of abandonment. I'm not only a child of a bipolar mother, but I was adopted. So like I still have the fear of abandonment, and I still have my own issues of how that I still work through with my therapist. I still have a therapist, and I have no shame in sharing that, because the wiser I become about myself, and just like you said, the triggers, if you become aware of the triggers, then you can actually manage those better. You're not at the effects of that reaction anymore. When things go wrong for me, I try to remember that life is really happening for me, and stop disagreeing, because when we disagree with our own reality, we create our own upset. I mean, directly from through Loving What Is, that book, Loving What Is like, stop resisting your reality. It is what it is. Like the pandemic, it is what it is. Like you can be upset about it, but you know what? No amount of upset is going to change the reality. So why even do that?
I love that. I was just talking to my own mom about, and she says to me, Victoria, the more we think about what we don't want, because we're so worried of it happening, the more we bring that into our existence.
True.
And I love, it's such an evolved thing, what you just said, which I think a lot of people struggle to get to a point in their life where they recognize that, which is that you will always get permission from people, therapists, professionals, friends, especially friends, that really wants the best for you, to feel validated in your anger, upset. Yeah. And the easiest thing to do is to do that, right? That's easy because we're so validated. What occurs is harder, and more of the work is to transcend that, like you said, and look, what is actually going to serve me, so that doesn't continue as a pattern where, and that's really wonderful.
But you know what, Victoria, I don't want everyone to think that like I have it all figured out and like I'm all like everything's hunky dory. I so do not. Like I still struggle with things. Like I'll be totally honest with you. Like I gravitate to people that are similar to my mother. Like in relationships, I still have to recognize, what is that feeding me? It's feeding me familiarity, but it's not good for me. So I still have to examine why I get into friendships or relationships with people, and they're so reminiscent of the feelings that I had as a child. So like you have to be willing to just take that hard look and go, oh, here we are again. We didn't get the lesson. I guess we have to learn it again, and it's a process. We're all works in progress, just trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that piece too, because I relate very, very much. And I know that a lot of people do too. So when we think about that moment for you, it sounds like it was a series of moments.
Yeah.
Or would you say that there was a part in your childhood, because as kiddos, you're right, we don't know any better,
Right.
any different. But was there a point in your childhood or at some point in your life where you're like, this is not how it's supposed to be, or this is not okay, or what I'm feeling is, was there
Yeah.
that moment?
So I was thinking about this before I came on with you today, like there are a couple of moments. So I think that as a little girl, there was a moment where I thought I was with the wrong family, right? Because when you're adopted and you realize you're adopted, you're like, oh, there's been a mistake. I am not with the right family. I had that moment. I had the moment
How
where
old were you? Sorry to interrupt.
I was like, I want to say 9 months old when my parents adopted me.
Wow.
So I had like this moment because my mother was so sick and I was like, oh, I should be with my mom. This is not the right family for me. So like I had those moments, like that little moment there. And then the moment when my girlfriend's parents, my girlfriend's mother, watching her interact with her daughter was just like, oh, wow, that's what normal is. I have no idea what that's like because my life is at home is so upsetting.
Mm.
So those two moments had me realize that things were different. And then I would say, what catapulted me into the direction of my mental health company is definitely going to be my TED Talk, right? The recognition that my little story, this insecure woman standing on the TED stage, you have no idea. I'm going to be talking to Carrie Barrett about insecurities. I was riddled with insecurities. Like, me stand on the TED stage? Are you kidding me? But that was a moment for me that gave me the confidence that my voice, the voice that had never been heard, like the voice that my mother told me never to use, was being heard. And when I was being heard and recognized that I could make a difference with that voice, that was like, okay, I'm writing this book. I am so writing this book because look, my voice matters. So that was pivotal. And then the third moment, which ultimately had me decide to leave the pharmaceutical industry when my position got eliminated and not try to fight to get back in, was when I was diagnosed with depression. So my mom was, like I said, my adopted mom, and I never thought I would ever deal with depression in my life because, I didn't have the same gene pool, but I was going through a divorce, a separation and divorce. And I suddenly found myself like not doing well. And my doctor diagnosed me with depression. And I was like, oh, wow, this is what it's like. So like, I know my mom's lens. I know what it's like to be a caregiver, but now I know what it feels like. Oh, it's terrible. So the moment that really had me realize I wanted to be a bigger contribution in the world was when I told my boss that I was diagnosed with depression because I was going to be the courageous one to go first. And 6 months after that, in my performance review, she evaluated me and said, you didn't bring your bubbly, upbeat self to work every day. And I thought, how many other employees have navigated a mental illness, found the courage within themselves to share, and was met with that level of insensitivity? That's when I was like, there's work to be done, and we need more compassionate workplaces. So
That's beautiful. And that's what you do. I want to interject one moment and just give a little bit of attention to our viewers. We actually have an amazing viewer, Susan Burdick, and she made a couple of comments. She says, you're a beautiful, wonderful speaker, and compassion is certainly huge. And she says the physical body also holds the emotions that need to be released. Have you done any work around that?
I've done some Reiki. I've done some metaphysical work with a Reiki practitioner, but nothing extensive, like beyond that. Yeah.
Got it. It's such a big topic, maybe for definitely another time.
Yeah.
I want to I want you to share about Trifecta. I want to know, and I want everyone to know, why did you name it Trifecta?
Yes.
And what is it that you do? What do you offer?
Sure. Thanks for asking. So I mentioned that I had the experience of growing up with my mother. So I had the caregiver lens on mental health. Then I had my own depression that I navigated. And that's two. And the third piece, which ultimately rounds out Trifecta, why I named my company Trifecta, is that when I was with my last Fortune 50 company, the same company where my manager told me I wasn't bubbly and upbeat, I was helping to create a mental health employee resource group and really shift the culture within the company. So I watched and I was part of what worked and what didn't work in creating that compassionate workplace. So those are the three lenses and why I named Trifecta that. And so what I do with Trifecta, it's funny. It's, you can't plan these things. I launched my company right before the pandemic. I have never been an entrepreneur in my life. I was always in the corporate space. So it was like new and new. It was definitely pushing me into expansion in ways I never imagined. And I had a couple of clients in the very beginning who, during the beginning stage of the pandemic, I wanted to work with them. The goal was for me to sit down with them and really look at what were they already doing for people with mental illness and invisible disabilities, and what could we do to kind of turn up the volume and really help their culture be really embracing of people with this scenario. And when the pandemic hit and everyone was remotely working, they actually said to me that they were worried about the well-being of their employees and they wanted to focus on that. So that was when my resilience program was created. It's called Protecting Your Happy. And it's really, it's the whole idea of it is I want to be the bridge to help people understand it's okay to not be okay, because we're living through a pandemic. But I also want to remind them of so many things they could be doing at home that they can actually implement into their routine to really protect their mental health. And then if that doesn't support them enough, I want them to know where to go for mental health clinical support, but most importantly, have the courage to reach out and get that support. Because we know that there are EAP lines within many, many companies that go underutilized because people just do not feel comfortable asking for help. So my role is to really help people get comfortable with not being okay, because it's more common now more than ever.
Beautiful. Do you work with the side of the managers as well, or do you only work with the staff? And I ask because, empowering staff and that, is definitely one thing. And then what happens when, maybe managers or administration is not open to what staff is wanting to share? Do you also do that other side?
Exactly. I think we need to, the clear example of my scenario that led me to create my company was that we had a remit from the top of the company that we were going to be an inclusive organization. And we had employees at the bottom level kind of doing the grassroots change. But what was missing was that middle manager role, that she was missing the boat. Like, she was not aligned. And it all has to do with checking your own biases. Like, what is your relationship? What is your self-development? So it's so important that we really get in there and we talk to people leaders and have them understand why it's so critical they have emotional intelligence, why it's so critical that they understand how they view mental illness. I had a very candid conversation with one of my dearest friends who, after probing her and asking her, she's like, I don't understand what you do. Tell me what you do. And after probing her and asking her questions, I finally got to the question and I said, do you think a mental illness is valid? And she goes, I don't know. So this is a perfect example. If you have a bias, that's how you're leading your people. If you have a bias that it's a cop-out, it's not real, or if you have no relationship, you're going to lead in that way. So yeah, we need to get out in front of those people leaders to have them really be mindful of how they can be leading their people and be more effective with caring for their people.
Incredible. And what is your big, this, maybe it might catch you off guard, but what is your big vision for your work? What do you ultimately want as the outcome? What do you want to leave the legacy?
I want to work with as many people as possible. So that was why I said I want to get into organizations and shift cultures, right? I can sit down with a caregiver. I can sit down with someone one-on-one and do one-on-one coaching. I have no problem doing that. And I do that. But when I think about the impact of how people feel about going to work, how they feel about their their work environment and how they feel about their people leader, which ultimately reflects how they feel about the company. I have the ability to get into these organizations and make change happen on a broader scale. So my goal, work with as many organizations, and even with educators. I've been holding my resilience program for teachers, because teachers have a lot of return to work anxiety, and they're wearing all these hats now. So I want to support them. So I've been working with teachers on to deliver the resilience program as well, just to remind them to care for themselves.
Incredible. And is there anything going on for you that's new now? Anything that you're rolling out that we should know about?
Yes. Actually, I have a very powerful mental health assessment that is part of my resilience program. So when I work with an employer, I will give them that data. I will share out the assessment for their people so they can sort of get the pulse of how their people are really doing. And then based on that feedback, we turn up the volume on those pieces in my resilience webinar to help them be better equipped. So it's truly customized based on how people are doing, but it's really important employers know exactly how their people are doing. The CDC says 1 in 3 are dealing with depression or anxiety right now. 1 in 3. So your people are affected. So if you want to keep them engaged and you want to keep them feeling good and mentally well, you got to be doing more than just an EAP hotline.
I love it. Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you. And any last messages, anything that you want to share with anyone about invisible disabilities, triumph through struggle, anything like that?
You know, Victoria, I still struggle with depression myself. I'll be honest with you. I have a lot of my friends and family reaching out to me and asking me, you know, hey, Michelle, can we talk? I think I have the D word going on. There are more people right now struggling in silence than we know. So, you know, one of the other things I'm going to be doing is launching morning, sort of a morning huddle where we talk, where people who might just need to pick me up can hop on. It's going to be free. I just want to do it for people because I know so many people are struggling. Yeah. But I say that because we got to check in on the ones that we love, especially the ones that are presenting like a very happy face, like me. I'm very good at being like, oh, I'm great, right? But really, I struggle too. I'm a human being. So don't underestimate the power of asking someone you love and checking in on someone you love and asking them how they're doing. This is a pandemic. This is hard. Life is not the same. So don't let any opportunity go by where you don't reach out to those that you love and just check in on them.
That is a beautiful message. And that sounds like a good ask of everyone who's watching. And now that you've given your ask, what's something that, you know, people can also, you know, give? If people are watching, who would you like to connect with, talk to? How can they help you?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to talk to decision makers within organizations, human resource leaders, to let them know what's available with my program. I would love to talk to decision makers of educators because teachers are struggling right now. I want to help teachers. Anyone. Tonight I'm doing a free program for a restaurant because restaurant workers are really worried about their income. We're anticipating probably another lockdown. These poor men and women who are servers in different restaurants, they're struggling. So I'm going to be giving my program to them sort of pro bono because I want to support them. So resilience is something that I think we all could benefit from getting a few tips on. So definitely check out my website to understand what's in my program. It's not just, smoke and mirrors. It's legit tools, tactics, things you can do. Check it out on my website, which is michelledickinson.com.
I love that. And any other way that you'd like people to reach out to you?
Through my website or even on Instagram.
And what is your Instagram handle?
It's, oh my gosh, I always mess up.
Is it your name?
It's Michelle. Michelle Dickinson 71.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
I really do urge everybody to reach out to Michelle if you feel that you can benefit, your company could benefit, an organization that you're part of could benefit, schools. What an incredible resource contribution you are. We have many smart people in the world, right? But not only are you smart and resourceful, but you have lived through many different things that make you someone who really understands. Like when I talk to you, Michelle, I feel like you really get it. And that is just invaluable. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I just know that it was such a contribution.
Thank you, my dear. It was wonderful to chat with you. I really appreciate all that you're doing as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much.